Welcome one and all. Today, we're going to look about leadership concepts. I'm Dr. Carolyn Golder, Assistant Professor in the Department of Management Studies, Women's Christian College. So I'll be teaching you certain concepts pertaining to leadership. So the topics that we'll be looking into are the definitions, evolution of leadership definitions, emerging leadership approach in 21st century, and the components of leadership. So all these aspects we'll be looking into in this session. So we'll look into the definition part. Leadership definition goes on like this. A review of the scholarly studies and all have revealed on leadership shows that there is a wide variety of different theoretical approaches to explain the complexities of the leadership process. So various researchers, various authors have given their viewpoint. Some researchers conceptualize leadership as a trait or as a behavior, and others view leadership from an information processing perspective or relational standpoint. Let's move on to the evolution of leadership definitions. So when you look into the definition part, it's kind of known. So leadership is a complex concept for which a determined definition may long be in flux. So year-wise, we can look in for the definitions. In 1900 to 1929, Moore 1927, he has given a definition that the ability to impress the will of the leader on those led and induce obedience, respect, loyalty, and cooperation. So when you look into this particular definitions, so it's kind of a definition of leadership appearing in the first 3 decades of the 20th century. And this emphasized the control and centralization of power with a common theme of domination. And next, when we move on to the years 1930s, so it's taken a different dimension. So leadership is also identified as the interaction of an individual's specific personality traits with those of group, noting that while the attitudes and activities of the many are changed by the one, the many may also influence a leader. So in this particular definition, the author has explained that trait has become the focus of defining the leadership with an emerging view of leadership as influence rather than dominance. In late years in 1940s, Hemphill in the year 1949 and Copeland in 1942, they have also given a definition, and they have a concept. The concept that they have took forth is kind of a group approach. So Hemphill in 1949, he has given a definition part like the behavior of an individual while involved in directing group activities. And whereas Copeland in 1942, he has given the definition, at the same time, leadership by persuasion is distinguished from drivership or leadership by coercion. So all these 3 dimensions that we have seen, that together has been utilized in 1950. So in 1950s, there were different definitions that has been given by different authors. So the continuance of group theory, which framed the leadership as what leaders do in groups. And also we could see defined leadership based on behavior of the leader. And also leadership is defined by the ability or to influence overall group effectiveness. So when you look into the theme, how these definitions have come across, so first is the group theory concept has been evolved. And next, when you look into leadership as a relationship that develops shared goals. And finally, the effectiveness. So when you possess the leadership quality, so what is going to yield? That's going to be the definition that we looked into in the 1950s. And move on to 1960. So 1960, Seaman 1960, he has given a definition like, it acts by person which influence other persons in a shared direction. So the theme that's revolving around this leadership definition is that behavior that influences people toward shared goals. And in 1970, Rost in 1991, from 1970 onwards, there is a different definition also is given. But this particular concept, so he has took forth organizational behavior approach. So organizational behavioral approach he has looked into. So he has given the definition as initiating and maintaining groups. So initiating and maintaining groups or organizations to accomplish group or organizational goals. And then in 1970, Burns, and he has given a definition. Again, he has also come up with the organizational behavioral approach. So this definition goes on like, leadership is the reciprocal process of mobilizing by persons with certain motives and values, various economic, political, and other resources in a context of competition and conflict in order to realize goals independently or mutually held by both leaders and followers. And then in 1980, again, the concept pertaining to the definition, it's little changed. So here in 1980, leadership is getting followers to do what the leaders wants to be done. So nature of leadership, they have dealt it with. So do as what the leader wish. And also leadership is non-coercive influence. So influential part also has been looked into, and based on that, the definition also has taken different dimensions. And Peters and Waterman in 1982, again, he has took forth the concept pertaining to traits. So leadership is based on trait orientation. And finally, in Burns 1978, again, he has took even more a different dimension. So he has come out with a transformational process. So his definition goes on like this. So leadership occurs when one or more persons engage with others in such a way that leaders and followers raise one another to higher levels of motivation and morality. So these are the evolutions that we have come across. And if you come across in the 21st century, so 21st century, if you look into, after decades of dissonance, leadership scholars, they agree on one thing. So what it is? So they can't come up with a common definition of leadership. So we looked into the group theory aspect, transformational aspect, trait aspect, behavioral aspect, likewise various dimensions they took, and based on that, they are able to give the definition. And the debate still continues as to whether leadership and management are separate processes, and while others emphasize the trait, skill, or relational aspects of leadership. And also, they don't stop there, because of those such factors of growing global influence and generational differences, leadership will continue to have different meanings for different people. And outmost, the bottom line is that leadership is a complex concept for which a determined definition may long be in flux. So let's move on to the emerging leadership approach in 21st century. So we do have authentic leadership, spiritual leadership, servant leadership, and adaptive leadership. Let us look into one after the other. So first one, if you look into, it's talking about the authentic leadership in 21st century. So authentic leadership, in this, the authenticity of the leader and their leadership is emphasized. All right. So next one, if you look into spiritual concepts, spiritual leadership. So spiritual leadership, it is focusing on leadership that utilizes values and senses of calling and membership to motivate followers. And the third one, servant leadership. So servant leadership puts the leader in the role of servant. And I can tell you that this particular concept, it's going to be work out very, very well. And because the leader, he puts himself in the role of servant who utilizes caring principles to focus on followers' needs to help these followers become more autonomous, knowledgeable, and like servants themselves. And in this pandemic time, you might be knowing about people who are becoming the leaders as kind of adopting the servant leadership model. I hope it will be a very effective, and all the followers will also be able to do their work as per what the leaders wish. And next, moving on to the last approach, adaptive leadership. So in which the leaders encourage followers to adapt by confronting and solving problems, challenges, and changes. So these are the 4 emerging leadership approach in 21st century. Let's move on to the components of leadership. So when you look into the components, so there are 4 important components. So in the definition part also, we've been keep on moving around these 4 aspects only. So let's look into in detail about those components. So leadership is a process. Leadership involves influence. Leadership occurs in groups, and leadership involves common goal. So when you combine all these together, so all these 4 components together, so what you'll be able to look into is leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. All right, so let's move on and understand each separately. So leadership is a process is the first component. So in this first component, it means that it is not a trait or characteristic that resides in the leader, but rather than a transactional event that occurs between the leader and the followers. And it's not stopping there. So process implies that a leader affects and is affected by followers. This is very important. So it's a process. Whichever the leadership is involved into, whichever the leader is involved into, he has to affect the followers. So it emphasizes that leadership is not a linear one-way event, but rather an interactive event. The proper conversation, proper communication, it should be there between the leader and that of the follower. And the next part, next component, if you look into, leadership involves influence. So it is concerned with how the leader affects the followers. The second, influencing. So influence is a sine qua non of leadership. Without influence, leadership does not exist. And moving on to the third component, leadership occurs in groups. So leadership is about one individual influencing a group of others to accomplish common goals. So common goals, without the common goals, people cannot function, the group cannot function, and so on. The final one, leadership involves the common goals. So leaders direct their energies toward individuals who are trying to achieve something together. So by common, we mean that the leaders and followers have a mutual purpose and attention to common goals that will give the leadership an ethical overtone, because it stresses the need for leaders to work with followers and to achieve the selected goals. So with that, I hope you'll be able to understand the concept pertaining to leadership, the definition, the evolution of definitions over the period of time, and also the components pertaining to it. I hope this would be an effective session. Thank you so much.